I'm very glad to welcome you at the Fanfare Talks. Your album, The Bow and the Brush, was really very intriguing release, and the interview itself made sort of special value in the prospect of general, uh, let's say, combination between visual art and music. And so I thought it might be very interesting to deepen the matter. Um, Just let's start. I would like to ask you, how actually do you combine all the several activities at once? Do you have a time turner?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a juggling act, and I wish I had a lot more time in the day. Um, and I have a bunch of different orchestra jobs and a teaching job, and I schedule them however I can. And I do most of my composing at night. I'm very much a and I practice just whenever I can. Um, when the pandemic shutdown happened, I had a little more fun than a lot of people. I just got to practice my violin by myself all day. Actually, not all day, all night. I did it all
All
night.
night.
Um,
Have you got some neighbors, don't you, that
yeah.
you can practice in the night? Is it, don't you have any issues with your neighbors to practice in the
Well,
night?
I would. See, here's the nice thing about teaching at UC Berkeley. I practice in my building. I live in a little apartment in Berkeley, and I practice in my building until 10 p.m. And then if I got to do more, I head over to the university. I'm only a couple miles away, and there I can practice all night. If I,
Right.
yeah.
It's very inspiring. So when I saw your pictures and paintings, and they're also very interesting. And I can see sort of parallels between your music and the painting. So when we say that art may be a part of something one, maybe we can't even devise one art from another. Do you feel it's how much you like is to compose or write a piece of music with make a painting or draw a painting or picture? Is it alike or it's rather differently?
Probably. I've actually never painted in my entire life, so I really couldn't say that for sure. Um, I I love looking at paintings. I love buying them. Um, I spend a lot of time in museums and galleries. Um, it seems to me that the two would come from the same place. And when I see brush strokes on a painting, it really does remind me of articulations with the bow here. Um, especially with the impressionists. I think maybe that's why I get so into that. Um, I feel a direct correlation between the impressionist art and the impressionist composers. I'm sure everybody does. That's not unique to me, but they seem very connected. The pastel colors, the fluffiness, and I just look at the skies in these paintings, and I just think about what we're doing over here. Um,
Drawings. Well, my teacher used to say that our right wrist is nothing but a brush of a painter. So this is how we connect one note with another. How do we choose different colors? And so would you agree with that?
yeah, I like that a lot. I've said similar things when I've taught, not exactly that, but I've definitely equated the two in teaching. I like that.
Also, when we speak about dynamics, how much color do we take and how much color do we apply on the paper or on canvas and how much pressure do we use on the string?
Mhm.
So the dynamics in the parallel to the amount of physical color on the brush. This
Oh,
was really
absolutely. Something I say to my students when it seems appropriate is I talk about how thick their sound is. And sometimes they think it's just loud and soft. And I say, no, it's about density of color, like in a painting. You can have a really, really thick blue, or you can have a very light blue. And that's how I teach flautando strokes and things like that. And, it's easy to understand when you
what
say
is
it
the
like.
main what if we say what is the main difference between visual art and the music? If we can define it.
How you absorb it. you know. I think that visual art probably takes you someplace. You know, you look at it and you travel to where it is. And music, you're taking in, you're internalizing. Um, both are going to control how you're feeling. Um, but I think that's the main difference. Obviously, there's the hearing versus the seeing, but I think that music gets internalized and visual art brings you somewhere forward.
Well, yes, when we observe the painting, we see something very concrete there in the picture, right? If we listen to music, we can actually make every time another story out of this.
Yeah.
To me, this is the main difference. But does picture sound to you? And does music, do you see music in pictures? Especially when you compose.
Well, yeah, especially when I
You do.
compose. They're not always necessarily connected for me. Um, like if I'm in a museum and I'm looking at multiple paintings and going from one to the next, I don't necessarily connect it right away. But when I'm home and surrounded by art like this, it's really inevitable. Um, the the visual arts create a feeling inside of me that music would also create. And that's why I like to equate the two. When I compose a piece inspired by a painting, I'm always trying to create that same feeling that the painting gives me. And not all composers do it that way. You know, I've commissioned something like 30 pieces now, and they all have their own take on it. And that's something that's so interesting. Um, some of them, it's because the painting reminded them of a story in their past. So they write the music about that. Others, it's they think of something happening in the painting and equate that to another situation and then write their music about that. And then there are others that are just trying to make the piece sound like the painting looks, which is what I do.
It's so interesting. How old have you been when you came across the visual art, and how old have you been when you started to get in touch with music?
In the womb, um, I was lucky with my parents for a lot of reasons, but they're not professional musicians or artists, but they love both. My mom has a particular love for the visual arts. She studied for I think a year or two at Chicago Institute of Art a long time ago, and she's always done art presentations. She's actually a psychotherapist, but she's loved the visual arts. So I grew up with just this adoration for Monet. And my dad did some singing off Broadway when he was young and then went into business, but he's been obsessed with Beethoven. So I think I was probably listening to the Ninth Symphony uh, long before I was born. And it's been a bond with my parents, those two things.
So, did they take you to a concert and to the vernissage from time to time as a
Yeah.
child?
Not as much as I wish, but we did. We used to go to Chautauqua not every summer, but most summers, and we'd see all the concerts there. And I grew up in New Jersey. I saw the New York Philharmonic a few times. We'd go to the Metropolitan Museum. A story my mom loves to tell everybody, and it really gets on my nerves because she's told it like 3,000 times now. The first time she brought me to the Metropolitan Museum of Art when I was like 3 years old, apparently, I don't remember this. I looked across the room and I said, "Look, mommy, there's your Monet." And I ran over to a water lilies thing that she had on the wall. So I don't remember this, but I remember my mom telling me many, many
So,
times.
we can actually say that your parents helped you to get on this way to the art, to find the connection. And if they wouldn't do so, you might even not find yourself where you are now. So, what do you think? Is it probably essential for us as adults and parents and educators and teachers be active and bring the younger generation really like at hand to the concert vernissage, and more even to explain what is the content about in one or another piece of art?
Mhm. Definitely the first part. I mean, if there's anything I'm sure of in life, it's that parents need to introduce their young children to the things that are wonderful in life, whether it's art and music or something else. But yes, absolutely. How much they need to explain it to their kids, that I really don't know. I have no idea about that. I don't understand child psychology. I've never been a very good teacher for kids. I used to do a lot of it because it's important to me, but it just is not where my natural inclination is. Um, I think that from what I've observed, little kids have this incredible way of soaking things up and understanding them in their own way. And some things will need to be explained, of course, but I think something as abstract as music, you can just let them take it in their direction. You see them reacting, you see them standing up and dancing or whatever. And I think that's great. Sometimes if you over intellectualize something for people, especially little kids, it can get in the way. I wouldn't want to tell a 6-year-old how to hear the Beethoven, you know. I'd want them to just experience it. But introducing it to them, and then reintroducing and reintroducing, I think that's crucial. It helps
So
shape.
basically, yeah, basically behind every piece of music, there is a story. It's behind your music, even you write it out very in a detail. And so I've noticed like something about in the past 30 years, something has changed very much. So even, do you remember when we were younger and going to the concert, there were a lot of people along with us in our age who were wishing to attend this concert. Nowadays, the age of people who are attending the concerts is usually far over 50 years. So why, why did this happen? What do you think?
I don't know. I can speculate about a couple of things. There are a lot of people who are much more knowledgeable about that than I am, but I think it's a combination of things. Certainly, there's the issue that when you're older and retired, you have more time to go to concerts, and younger people are working or I don't know, going out dancing or something. And maybe as people get older, they start going to classical concerts more. I'm not so sure about that. At least in this country, I think it stems from the fact that we've mostly destroyed arts programs in schools, especially music programs. It's just not an essential part of the curriculum. And as a result, it's not an essential part of our culture. And it's an outsider thing. And a lot of people think it's an elitist thing. I don't see it that way at all.
Yes, that's a very important point because this image of elitist thing came quite not that long. It's something quite new. The music was never so elitist. Not 200 years ago, not 300 years ago. It was always a part of social life. It was a part of funerals, of weddings, of everything, basically. There is no wedding without Mendelssohn and no funeral thinkable without Chopin, let's say, like, in a simple way. And nowadays we hear more and more that this is something for elite and usually with money, which is actually not the case.
um, no, that's just not true at all. I mean, every concert hall I'm aware of in this country absolutely welcomes anybody, and you can dress however you want. This idea that you're supposed to wear a suit or a tuxedo is nonsense. I mean, people have been going to the Met Opera in jeans and sneakers for decades now. In addition to that, tickets are so much cheaper for classical concerts than they are for major rock shows. People talk about being expensive and unaffordable to the masses. I'm sorry, that's bullshit. I look at whatever show is happening at an arena, and the tickets start at $200 and go up to $1,000. Every symphony concert in this country has like $10 student tickets, and the non-student tickets start at like $35 or $50, and the most expensive are like 200 or 250. So I don't really know where that concept comes from, but it's just not true. Um, I think the idea that you're supposed to be quiet during the music gets in the way for a lot of people. And that's something I grapple with when I'm in a concert, especially in the audience. because I really want everyone to shut up. I want to hear quiet so I can hear every single subtle nuance of what's going on. But I think that gets in the way for a lot of people, and I really don't know what the answer is for that. Maybe just different kinds of concert venues. You know, you've got this classical revolution thing happening around the country. A guy I know here in San Francisco started it, and it's, you know, string quartets in bars and coffee houses, and people can cheer while they hear the music. Maybe that's the answer. I really don't know. I was at a concert last night, and it was very, very quiet, subtle music. And the person behind me had lots of jangly jewelry, and it drove me nuts because the jewelry was louder than the music I was hearing. If I were to turn around and say something, would that be elitist? Probably. So I didn't. But that's the issue.
I don't believe that that is elitist at all, and so I never believed that also visual art is for the elite. To me, it has a connection with the modern expression of art, where people stopped to sort of get along with what is the story about, either behind the picture or what is actually the music about. So people started to be not understanding the art, and maybe this it is for elite was like a sort of just possible answer to get why we do not understand anymore this matter. So how would you describe why did music has changed so much in the direction of being not accessible for larger audience, and with not accessible, I do mean really not understandable, or maybe even emotionally not available. So why did this happen? Is the modernism the issue in this, or it's just a part of evolution? Shall we get away from this? And if yes, then how? Basically, when I heard your music, I didn't review, but I thought there's lots of connections. So your music is really connected to the roots. We can't say it was just, something very modern, written out of the blue. You can hear perfectly the bridges to Impressionism and also to classic and Mozart, and everything makes perfectly sense. So you can build it very well. So when you're composing, do you have this in mind to be understood or to be really well received with your ideas, or it comes rather naturally?
A little bit of both. When I compose a piece, I'm a very new composer, by the way. I've only been composing about 5 years. It's something I always wanted to do, but only got into it recently. And I'm still finding my way and developing as a composer. I think when I write music, unlike a lot of people who study music, say in university for years and years and years, I'm writing music for specific performances right away. And it's usually a performance that I'm giving with friends. And yeah, I want the audience to like it. I'm writing the music for me, and I want it to be something I like, although I never like anything I've composed as much as, say, Brahms. Um, but I am writing music I like, and I'm writing music that I want to be effective for the audience. It's not just an intellectual pursuit. There are a lot of composers out there who are trying to write something new, and I think that's been going on probably forever. We don't remember composers who just wrote exactly what everybody else was doing. We remember composers who did something new with genius. So a lot of composers are attempting to create brand new sounds, brand new notations. And I think the general audiences don't really go for that, and that's okay. It's got its niche. That's not what I do. Um, a lot of audience members have said that they like my music because they hear the tonality of the music they like. It's mostly tonal. It's got structure, it's got melody and harmony, but it also has some new music techniques. It's got um, some things that are maybe a little bit new. I don't know, I'm experimenting. So it seems to bridge the two nicely, or at least introduce new music to traditional music audiences. Maybe that's what I'm trying to do. I don't
And
know.
maybe this is why it's possible to get along with. So I'm convinced that to be aware that if you compose, then first of all, to have a thought for whom you do compose and how will be this received. And if the audience hasn't got it, then there aren't plenty of, let's say, unwilling people who are unwilling to understand, but they simply didn't understand what is the story about. And I think maybe this elitist accusation came from this modernist period where music was just, like something, either you understand it or you are a fool. And so people got scared. But I'm sure that this is maybe the only one approach to re-establish the classical art. Because do you remember, while COVID, we had all the slogan, the art is system relevant. So let me ask you, is it so right now?
I don't think so. I do not think that art is relevant in our current society in America. And I say that with great sadness. For me, it's absolutely necessary, and I'd like to think that it's necessary for everybody. But I don't know. I see a lot of people where it's not relevant. I would like it to be more relevant, um, and I'm working towards that for sure. As far as the elitist thing, I think there have always been composers who wrote music for an elitist circle. I don't think that's anything new. Um, the difference is music that was once loved by everybody that is no longer loved by everybody, the standard repertoire. And I'm not sure what the answer is for that. Um, why does everybody come and see the Nutcracker all the time? Uh, I've got about 15 Nutcracker performances this month. I'm at about 400 lifetime performances now. Why is that so beloved and other things aren't? And I think it's because it's advertised. It just comes down to what the public is told to go and like and what they're introduced to at a young age. You go see the Nutcracker, and there are thousands of moms with little girls in tutus going in to see it. And it's one of these traditions where every little girl has to go and see the Nutcracker and loves it because it's so great, and then wants to keep doing it. Why does that not happen with the Rite of Spring? Well, I mean, that's probably obvious, but why does that not happen with other great classical repertoire like Midsummer Night's Dream? I think that's a good parallel because they're both dreamlike. Um, Probably because there hasn't been the same regular advertising of go see this, go see this, go see this, go see this.
Well, the story is nice, the libretto is nice, the staging is nice. Tchaikovsky was really very good ballet composer, especially in the ballet. So it's all like like a Fabergé egg. It's so like a jewel made to impress very large audience in the connection to the fairy tale in the background of it, which of course recalls lots of association. The question is, do you think when Nutcracker was performed for the first time, it was nothing but contemporary art? Could we ever possibly achieve the same level of success with any piece of art which is composed, written, and staged now? More though, can it survive like 200 years in advance and still be so attractive as Nutcracker?
I sure hope so. I really don't know. Um, I don't really understand what audiences like on the whole. I leave that to the people who specialize in that. I would love to think that there are things that are created now that will be loved forever. Um, And I actually don't know how successful the Nutcracker was when it was first performed.
Oh, very much. Very
It
much.
was. Okay. Yeah. That sounds
Very
familiar.
much.
I just don't remember off the top of my head. I really don't know.
If I might ask you, then would you compose a ballet? Which story for libretto of which author would you choose then?
I've been wanting for a long time to compose to compose an opera about Kafka's Metamorphosis. Um, it's a short story about the guy who wakes up one day and he's a cockroach. And I've always
You
thought that
come.
would just be so great if the title character can't speak. And
Yeah.
someday I'm going to do it. I need to become a better composer. I don't know if that's going to be the opera that is beloved by audiences on day one and becomes standard repertoire.
How many little girls will come to see Kafka? That's the
I don't
question.
know. Probably none. This would probably be one of those things where there are 8 people in the audience. But I think, a contemporary example of that wouldn't be, it would be more like The Lion King. That's the art form of the United States today. It's big musical theater that's tied in with pop music and tied in with Disney and Hollywood and things like that. That's what's the popular art form today. So I think, The Lion King is incredibly successful, and I think it will be remembered forever. Um, it's probably not an opera by Dan Flanagan, uh,
Surely
but
not.
we'll
And
see.
there's
You never know.
yeah, and there's actually a gap between popular art and classical art. So can we stay in the frame of classical art? So if we say, please compose a classical opera or ballet based on a classical novel, it may be a contemporary novel or a piece of literature of any time, but it has to stay classical. What I observe is that people almost don't know anymore what is actually classical art and what is popular art. Do you agree with me? Do
I do
you
agree.
feel the same about it?
Yeah. There's a trend in newly composed works that are meant to be beloved. They always have a crossover element. Um, and for better or for worse, that's just what it is. It's not, the classical art form. And a lot of people in the music industry feel that classical music has to change if it's going to stay relevant. And that's a that's a philosophy that may very well be true. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but I'm not sure what I think about that.
No,
But
it's about to keep an art or a genre genuine. If you want to stay lion, you maybe should avoid to mix with tiger. If you really want to keep safe an art of lions, maybe it's not really a smart idea to mix it with another art. And that's the point. I'm really absolutely sure that crossover might be nice, but it's never the way to re-establish classical music because it loses this genuinity, genuine art. It's something else then. Nobody is saying that this is something bad, but it's not a classical music anymore. So how can we define what is classical music, what is popular music, and how does these both genres really differ from one another?
I agree with you. What you said before. I went into classical music because of the traditional repertoire that I love. And I do like the directions of experimental new music quite a bit. I personally am not a fan of crossover, but that's just kind of like I don't like certain kinds of sushi either. You know what I mean? There's a time and place for everything. Um, I'm not sure how I define the difference between a traditional classical music that's new and something that's crossover. That's hard to say. What's that quote? There was some senator a long time ago when they were talking about, I don't know, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Um, I think that's really the only thing I would be able to say. I don't know how I define the two. I really just don't.
But you call yourself a classical composer, right?
Yeah.
And there's also something interesting about that we say that there is a classicism and romanticism, impressionism, and so on. And now we have a modernism, but we never speak about it also in the contemporary time. In time now, we still can be of different genres. We can have contemporary classicism, we can have contemporary romanticism as well in the music, also in the literature, very much. We can write romantic, we can write criticism, and we can also switch from one genre or style to another and remaining be contemporary artists. So, and there's no need at all to go and to cross over to popular art. If looking back, there was always popular art or folkish art and a classical art. And this classical art had its evolution. So I did write you, if we think also in visual art back to the Renaissance of the paintings and go together with the evolution, we see the reflection of the social tendencies. So what would you say? Where are we actually now?
We're all over the map. We have dozens of divergent paths. Everybody's trying to figure out where to go and how to keep things relevant and how to keep things alive and how to make up for past mistakes. And I really don't know what the answer is for that. I think it's really cool that we're going in a lot of different directions. And I'm excited to see where everything ends up. When we look back on what's good, it's always a hindsight thing, though. I think in any given time, there's all sorts of art being created that just gets forgotten for whatever the reason is. And what's remembered is remembered for reasons we can't really foresee right now. I think there's probably always been an element of crossover, though. You've got folk music being written into the classical music for a long time. Obviously Bartok and Vaughan Williams and people like that. And you've got the popular music branching out into the opera world, even with Mozart and Rossini and people like that. So what ends up being looked at as popular music versus classical art, I think it's a hindsight thing. We'll know the difference between those two things of today 100 years from now.
Right. The question is if the planet is going to make it so long. There was a sentence by T.S. Eliot that there's a time period of creative output and a time period of critical output, or rather critical reflection. And I would say nowadays we have a period of creative critical editing. We have to sort out the new actual creative inputs with critical reflection and edit it all together, even maybe in new or in new form, in order to keep it. Because if we just think of what is happening on the planet with the climate, with all the situation in the world, it's like you depart from a holiday and you do not buy new food, you just try to make it to get it all together. And so we really need to understand, in my opinion, that the time has really changed as the weather has changed. There's nothing to argue about. It is how it is. And this is why it's so important. If we ask how relevant is art, the art is relevant if we really want to remain a civilization. What differs us from a primal state of primacy is the art. Even like in the Iron Age, we can see pieces of art on the walls, on the stones. So we really need to understand, because I was touched with your expressions to you. The music means the essence of being. But how could we possibly make it clear that is to all of us an essence of being?
I think the important thing is for people to create art that's important to them and share it with everybody. Essence of being is such a subjective thing. I think that's for everybody to decide. themselves, what's going to move them and what's not, and where they want things to go, and what they want to create and what they want to enjoy. I agree that we have evaluated past civilizations based on their art, and I think that's something that's so fascinating. Every single civilization from ancient times to today, we have their art and we look at it and we talk about what it must have meant and how it reflects the essence of what their society is. And I think that's really fascinating.
Just moving on about performing with a disease, as I did write to you, that is actually very important. It has also a relevant point when we think of this established, let's say, cult of perfectionism on stage uh, among the musicians, and even non-professional musicians are very affected to be able to play perfect. And then you have this attitude and bravery to go out there and to explain how you can fight with your disease. So, how do you feel about this yourself?
Well, performing for me is always a challenge. I'm always in a lot of pain. My muscles don't want to cooperate with me. I'm usually very dizzy. Stage lights make it much, much worse because Lyme disease has attacked my eyes and my brain and my nervous system. Um, it sure would be nice if I didn't have to be as accurate as is necessary. But that's just the way it goes. Perhaps that contributes to the elitism of our classical music genre, the perfectionism that's required. Um, it sure would be nice if it didn't matter that much. I think people would enjoy playing a whole lot more. I know I would. Uh, but I think that comes from a place where there's less and less classical music performance happening in our society. And therefore the competition is more and more fierce to be able to do it professionally. And the only way to really evaluate a subjective art form is through accuracy. So that's what happens in competitions. That's what happens in auditions. You know, if you look at like a major symphony audition or even a minor symphony audition, you got 5 to 10 people sitting on a committee and listening to somebody play from behind a screen, and they're all going to disagree with the quality of the player's sound or the how they build their phrase or the way they decided to trill or whatever. But they can agree when it's out of tune. They can agree when the rhythm's not good. So I think that's really shaped what classical music is now. Does it have to be that way? I don't know. Is it a good thing? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I sure like listening to a performance that's in tune and accurate. But there are other things that are far more important to me. There are, I love tone color. I love phrasing. I love risk taking. Above everything else, I like beauty of sound. Um, I want to hear a musician who has an interesting tone color and changes that tone color from one phrase to another or one piece to another. That's what's most important to me. If it's really inaccurate, well, it kind of gets in the way of enjoying it. And where that line is, I think that's different for everybody. I can tell you if anybody wants to hear incredibly accurate violin playing, always in tune, don't listen to me.
No, it's in general very interesting because the performance differs from the recording experience so far that this is a live communication. It is an act of interaction between different people, composer, musician, and the audience. So, and this is nothing but a sort of interpersonal act. And so we are, as musicians, so concerned about our technique and how do we play that we frequently forget what do we play and what are we actually transmitting there. So just imagine the situation you are standing and kissing and are just concerned about how to do it and just letting beside what is coming out by the partner out there. And actually, to me, it has the same effect as such a kiss. The sort of performance when the performer is busy with oneself, self's accuracy on the instrument. Don't you think?
Yeah, can you imagine a makeout session that goes on for 15 minutes where both people are just worried about their skills? My God, that would be awful. Unfortunately, I think that's what a lot of classical performance is now, um, particularly in the auditions process. Everybody on an audition committee says that they want to hear great music making and they want you just to go for it, but you got to be accurate, and people are really thinking about their technique all the time. And I think it takes the fun out of it. Um, a couple of days ago, I played a house concert, and my friend Paul, he's an artist. He's painted my portrait a bunch of times, and he puts together house concerts, and I come and bring friends. And we played a Brahms piano quintet and a Brahms piano quartet and Mozart piano quartet. And it's like the most fun I ever have because I can do whatever I want. Of course, I'm trying to play in tune, but I'm not preoccupied with being accurate. I'm preoccupied with having a great time and making great music with my friends. And in some cases, I end up playing better, but I definitely fell on my face on a few phrases. I went for something and it wasn't all that accurate. It wasn't the tightest performance you've ever heard, but we sure had a great time. And it would be nice if everything were like that, but it's not. I think recordings have done a lot for this too, because any recording somebody listens to, it's a Frankenstein at this point. It's thousands of edits, sometimes note by note with pitch correction. And that's what we think performance is, and that's what we're striving for when we're playing live. It sure makes it daunting.
In a way, we can say if we are so concerned about the accuracy, we can't be really exciting. Let's come back to the example with the kissing. We really can't. And then we do not need to be surprised. Why aren't we so exciting and why people are falling asleep there in the hall? And so maybe it's good point to start that no artist is going on stage to show the skills to be accurate. The artist is going on stage to transmit, to explain the story, and to share own feelings about this or another musical content, to make it possible to rejoin with the audience, like to take them on the wings, but not to judge if you are accurate or not, because for accuracy, you really better go and download Spotify,
Right.
and it's perfectly accurate. And also, I was involved in a dispute about later concert by Maurizio Pollini. He gave a couple of concerts, one in London, one in Switzerland, and he obviously didn't feel really well. And just consider the fact that he is quite over 80, and he has got a review about, in terms like lost his dignity, lost his face. And from the critical point, like a critic or art press, I just can't take this sort of critic on the artist like Pollini, because no one is going to listen to Pollini to admire his accuracy. Go to listen to Pollini, who is over 80, to take part on something very unique. When an artist with such an overview back, like almost a century back, gives you his experiences from the skyline view from over there. And how dare you can write a critique that Maurizio Pollini has lost his faith because he has forgot something and make mistakes. So this is a point. We do not need to search for the mistakes in the audience, by people, in the music, maybe in our attitude to the music. What do we show? What is here to cherish and where to listen and where to watch on? So it's so important, and this is why I like so much your open explanation of your state of health, and that you, despite this fact, you go on stage and play, and that's so right in a way. And also, there's no machine on stage. There's no artificial intelligence. It's a person who is giving oneself to the audience. So why not to cherish this? Cherish the fact that it's a sort of self-sacrifice when you go on stage and play. You give your body, you give your muscles, your sweat and your blood to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So don't dare to start to judge if the A flat was too low and F sharp too high.
It's very nicely said.
That's why I think that's where it starts with classical music, and the way to cross over is not the right one. It's not at the audience. We don't need to change the genre. We need to maybe rearrange our interjudgment inside of the art. What are we criticizing? What are we not criticizing? Basically, the critics is there to guide through the piece of music and not to spot the artist. What would you like to play mostly in the future? Which pieces would you really like to record? Is it standard repertoire or is it just your own music? Where's it going for you in the future?
I'm in the process of recording The Bow and the Brush Volume 2, which is all world premieres, pieces I commissioned or composed inspired by paintings. And there's going to be some chamber music on that album, which I'm very excited about. A couple of new pieces currently being written for me. I've got Trio Solano on that. That's me and a couple of friends, Paul and Vicky Ehrlich. And when that's finished, which will probably be in about a year, and then it'll be released in 2025, my next plan to record is music of Albert Spalding. He is a forgotten violinist. Although in the 30s, he was the most played violinist on American radio. And my violin used to belong to him. I'm sure it was his cheap picnic fiddle. It's a Viome, and he performed on, Strads and Delgesius like everybody else. But he did have this Viome a long time ago. And I was obsessed with Spalding even before I got a hold of this violin. I just think he's a fascinating character. He went and studied in Europe when he was very young. He was born in the end of the 19th century, and then came, was like a child prodigy over there, and then came back here and was a big hit here and fought in the First World War. And then between the First and Second World Wars, he did espionage over in Europe. So he'd play recitals and then, go hang out with the fascist aristocracy and whatnot and listen in and come back and tell the US government. I think I just like that. I think it's fun. Anyway, he wrote a lot of pieces for violin and violin and piano, some of which have never been recorded. So I'm planning to record those. And I hope nobody listens to this and steals my idea before I get to it. And he's got a solo sonata for solo violin. And he recorded it once, but it was never released. So I might include that. I'm not sure. But that's my next plan. And after that, I don't know. I'll see where my life takes me. By the time that's finished, we're probably talking about 4 years, 5 years from now. And who knows what I'll be into then. 5 years ago, I was a very different person 5 years ago than I am now. So we'll see what happens there.
Exactly. So for all of us, as I usually like to close the podcast, I love to change places. And please feel free to ask me any questions you like.
Tell me what you like to play.
Isai. I've recorded all 6 Isai sonatas on the viola.
Wow. I'll have to go and check that out.
It was my life project, which I've done for my entire life. I work on the equalization between the violin and viola. And I decided, after I worked with Bach, with sonatas and partitas, I decided myself to try out how easily it will work on the viola. And actually, I've started with the ballad, and it was like a single sonata, and then it went one after another. And I have discovered that even the first was sounding much more interesting or differently on the viola, just because of the enlarged diapason between the bass and the soprano. So you have much more polyphone moves to follow, and all fugatos are much more structured And so then at the end, I thought, okay, I record this like three. And even the fifth and the sixth were actually very interesting on the violas. So I've recorded all six on an album. And also, if you, I have got commissions from contemporary composers which have composed homage to Isai for this every single Isai sonata. So it was a double CD. And on the other hand, I did an edition of Beethoven sonatas for violin, the C minor, and cello sonatas for the version for piano and viola. But more though, also an edition which is really dedicated for amateur players to get along with musical text. Because when I went into Beethoven, I've noticed that there are so many things. Let's think back to the manuscripts and the first editions, which got lost edition by edition, then which came to the like 60s. And it was really sorry to see so many articulation differences, which might save us a lot of sweat, like we need a balance between the piano and the string instrument, which we are fighting for. But Beethoven took care of this thing and made for every instrument different articulations. But the editors thought Beethoven was just, sort of, he didn't pay attention and equalized these articulations, and this why we do have our balance problems. If we come back and play exactly his articulations, which are always differently in the string instrument part and in the piano part, then we are every single time a little bit off on one another. So we are never really together with the piano. And this why nobody's swallowing each other. And this why a string instrument is much more free in the dynamical expression, and nobody has to play permanently forte because it can't be possible that a string instrument has to be always forte. And so I went one by one and thought that actually we need to open up also to non-professional players how to deal with musical text to be able to read it accurately. And then we have much more joy. It's like, to read the news from a paper, we really need to understand what is written inside. And in order not to, to lose ourselves in fake news and beliefs and we still ruling the world. So that's what I like to do.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'm going to have to go and check out your Izai immediately. As soon as we get off, I'm going to go and look for it. I love Izai. I've got an autographed photo of him just around the corner there. All the autographed photos of his teachers, Wieniawski and Vital, right over there. And one of his students, Louis Persinger. Actually, a Persinger student, Janina Robinson, was my second violin teacher. I love the whole family tree of violinists. I mean, we're not that far away. And I tell my students this all the time when I work on, Wieniawski concerto with them. I say, you study with me. I studied with Janina Robinson, who studied with Louis Persinger, who studied with Izai, who studied with Wieniawski. You're not that far away. And in that way, we're all connected to Corelli. That I'm like 11 teachers away from Corelli. I think that's
amazing. Amazing.
But when we were in the pandemic shutdown for the university, I did a Zoom class every Tuesday night for all the violins and violas because they didn't have, symphony rehearsal. And we do a master class where they play whatever they wanted and, select students. Everybody got to play something at some point. But then with the rest of the time, I did this presentation on the legendary violinists throughout history, starting with Corelli. And it was more for me than for them because I just loved this. And some of them got really into it. And I just connected everybody throughout history to where we are today. And I think that's an amazing thing. Pretty much every violinist on the planet today is connected to Corelli, and Vian. And I think that's so great.
Anyway, thank you so much for your time. It was a real joy to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to talk again for the new releases. And have a nice day ahead. Have a nice time, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. Same to you.